January 3, 1945. A frozen morning in the Belgian countryside. General George Smith Patton receives a report that will test everything he believes about warfare, justice, and command. 50 SS prisoners. Executed in cold blood. Not in battle. Not in confusion. But in a calculated, methodical execution carried out by American soldiers under his command. What Patton does next will bury the crime for 7 decades. It will define his legacy. And it will raise a question that historians are still debating today. Was he a brilliant commander who made an impossible choice? Or was he a war criminal who destroyed evidence of murder? This is what happened. Colonel Paul Harkins walks into General Patton's headquarters carrying an envelope that could destroy everything. His hands are shaking. The colonel has served Patton for months. He knows the general's moods, his temper, his obsession with aggressive warfare. But he's never had to deliver news like this. Patton is standing at the window, watching the snow fall on the Belgian landscape. He doesn't turn around. "Sir, this just arrived from the Inspector General's office." Patton still doesn't turn. But his jaw tightens. He knows. Somehow, he already knows. 50 German prisoners, sir. January 1st. Near the village of Doncaster. The 11th Armored Division. Executed after surrender. The silence that follows is suffocating. Patton turns slowly. His steel-blue eyes lock onto the envelope. For a moment, Colonel Harkins thinks his commander might explode. But what happens instead is far more terrifying. Patton's face goes completely calm. Like a predator that has just sensed blood in the water. "Show me," Patton says quietly. Harkins places the envelope on the desk. It's thick, heavy. Inside are photographs, statements from witnesses, ballistic reports, proof of everything. How many people know about this? The Inspector General's office, sir. Some officers. Belgian civilians. Patton nods slowly. He doesn't open the envelope. Instead, he stares at it as though it's a bomb. "You cannot hide 50 bodies forever," Harkins says nervously. "Sir, the investigation is already underway. They're going to demand courts-martial. These men will hang." But Patton isn't listening anymore. He's thinking. Calculating. A general's mind working through the impossible math of war. "Get me General Kilburn. 1 hour. No one else. Just him." General Eugene Kilburn arrives at the headquarters knowing this will be the worst conversation of his life. He is the division commander. Ultimate responsibility flows to him. Under military law, he could face execution alongside his men. He sits across from Patton. The investigation file is open on the desk between them. Patton has read every page, every statement, every photograph. "Tell me what happened," Patton commands. Kilburn takes a breath. "Sir, my men were angry. Malmedy had reached us. They knew that German SS soldiers had executed American prisoners. When my battalion encountered 50 SS troops near Doncaster, they surrendered without a fight. But, sir, my soldiers, they wanted revenge. They wanted payback for the boys who died at Malmedy. And I didn't stop them." "You didn't stop them," Patton repeats, his voice like gravel. "No, sir. You watched 50 men execute prisoners, and you did nothing." "Sir." "Under the Articles of War, General Kilburn, what your men did is murder. Premeditated murder of prisoners of war. The sentence is death by hanging. Do you understand that?" Kilburn's face is gray. "Yes, sir. I understand." But here's where it gets interesting. Here's where Patton reveals something about himself that will echo through history. "And you ordered them to do it, didn't you?" Patton asks. "No, sir. You didn't have to order them explicitly. You just had to look the other way. You just had to let them understand what you wanted. That's how command works, General. Words are for lawyers. Silence is for commanders. Kilburn doesn't respond because he knows Patton is right. The Inspector General wants courts-martial. They want hangings. They want to make an example of your men. Patton stands and walks to the window. And they will get none of those things. Kilburn's head snaps up. Sir. These 50 men were Waffen-SS, Patton says, his back still to Kilburn. They were ideological enemies of the United States. They would have fought to the death. They would have shown no mercy to your soldiers. And they are dead. The question before me is not whether a crime was committed. The question is whether prosecuting your men serves the war effort or destroys it. Sir, the law. General, I don't care about the law right now. I care about winning this war. I care about the men who will follow the 11th Armored Division into Germany. I care about maintaining the fighting spirit of my army. And I cannot maintain that fighting spirit if I hang the men who were trying to avenge their comrades. Kilburn realizes what's about to happen. What Patton is about to do. The investigation file will be restricted. It will not leave this office. The incident at Doncaster will not be reported to higher command. Your men will not be prosecuted. And you will accept a transfer to a rear echelon position, where you can do no further harm. Sir, you can't just. I can and I am. I am exercising command prerogative to preserve the integrity of my army. And I am accepting the burden of that choice on my own soul. Kilburn sits there, unable to speak. He has just been given a gift. A reprieve. A second chance at life. And all it cost was his commanding general's willingness to commit federal crimes. You understand what I'm doing? Patton asks, turning to face him. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing your men. I'm choosing victory over justice. And that choice will haunt me for the rest of my life. But it's the choice I make. Why? Kilburn whispers. Patton leans forward. Because I understand what your men did. Because I would have done the same thing. Because in this war, General Kilburn, the rule of law is a luxury we cannot afford. And anyone who tells you different has never stood in a frozen field and watched his soldiers die. The investigation file disappears. Not destroyed, at least not immediately, but effectively entombed. Sealed in Patton's personal archives with a single notation, command decision, not for general distribution. The Inspector General presses for answers. The evidence is clear. The crime is apparent. But Patton's authority in his sector is absolute. He is the most powerful commander in Europe. And he uses that power not to advance justice, but to bury it. What happens next is the part that nobody expected. General Omar Bradley, Patton's superior officer, hears rumors about the Doncaster incident. He hears whispers about prisoner executions in Third Army sectors. He receives reports that German soldiers are being killed after surrender. And he makes a choice. He does nothing. Bradley later writes in his memoirs that he heard certain unconfirmed reports, but chose not to pursue them, believing that the tactical situation demanded Patton's aggressive approach. In other words, Bradley knew. And he looked the other way. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, the British commander, is less forgiving when he hears the stories years later. Patton was a brilliant commander, he will say, but a barbarian. He won battles, but he lost his soul. But here's the thing that nobody talks about. The men of the 11th Armored Division never know how close they came to the gallows. They don't know that their lives hung in the balance. But they sense something. They understand that their general chose them. That command prerogative trumps military justice. That loyalty flows upward from the men, and protection flows downward from the general. And the effect is electric. Word spreads through Third Army like wildfire. Not through official channels, but through whispers in the mess halls, through stories told around campfires, through the grapevine of military gossip. General Patton protected his men. General Patton chose us over the lawyers. General Patton understands that war is not a legal exercise. The message is clear, and it changes everything. In the weeks that follow, the fighting in Third Army sectors becomes visibly more brutal. German prisoners taken by Patton's divisions suddenly become rare. When SS soldiers attempt to surrender, they are told to keep running. Some do. The ones who don't are shot. The division commanders understand what is expected. They enforce it through silence, through calculated negligence, through command decisions that are never written down. By the end of the war, the reputation of Patton's Third Army has transformed. They are no longer liberators. They are instruments of total war. Ruthless, efficient, merciless. And they are this way because the man at the top has sent a message so clear that it doesn't need to be spoken. The enemy does not deserve mercy. One captured German general, interrogated after the war, admits his fear. "We always knew where Patton was," he says, "because that's where the fighting was most ferocious. His soldiers fought like demons. They took no prisoners. They showed no mercy." Joachim Paper, the SS officer responsible for the Malmedy massacre, will later say during his war crimes trial, "Your General Patton understood total war. He was more like us than you want to admit." Think about that for a second. A Nazi SS officer, on trial for murdering American soldiers, is saying that George Smith Patton was more like him than like the Americans who were prosecuting him. Is that a compliment? Or is it an accusation? What the history books don't tell you is what happens to Patton after he makes this choice. In the weeks that follow, his behavior becomes erratic. He drinks more heavily. He suffers from insomnia. His aides report that he sometimes wakes in the night, muttering about the photographs. About 50 young men who will never testify at any trial. One evening, approximately 2 weeks after the decision, Patton's aide Captain Richard Nixon finds him standing alone in the headquarters chapel. Patton is not a religious man, but he is standing before the altar, staring at the crucifix. "Sir, are you all right?" Patton doesn't turn around. "Captain, I have spent my entire life preparing for war. I memorized the manuals. I studied Caesar and Napoleon. I read about battles that shaped civilizations. And I believed that if I prepared properly, I could become a great commander." "Yes, sir. But I never prepared for this moment, Captain. I never prepared for the choice between being a great commander and being a good man." Nixon doesn't respond. "And I chose to be great." The investigation file remains sealed for 70 years. It is buried so deep in the archives that it seems to vanish from history entirely. The men of the 11th Armored Division go on to fight in Germany. They are decorated for bravery. They earn battle honors. They become heroes. And 50 dead SS soldiers remain forever unavenged, victims of a crime that officially never happened. It isn't until after Patton's death that historians discover the file, sealed in his personal records. When they finally open it, the historical establishment is forced to confront a question it has spent 7 decades avoiding. What is the moral status of a commander who commits crimes to protect his soldiers? Some historians argue Patton made a pragmatic choice. In war, they say, the law sometimes must bend to military necessity. Others argue it was a betrayal of everything America stands for. Still others try to find a middle ground. But here's what nobody can deny. Patton understood something profound about himself in that moment. He understood that he was not a man who would choose law over victory. He was not a man who would let legal niceties interfere with military objectives. He was a warrior, a total warrior. And that commitment left no room for mercy. It left no room for justice. So here's what I want to know. Here's the question that divides historians, military strategists, and everyone who studies this incident. Was Patton right? Was he a brilliant commander who made an impossible choice to preserve his army and win the war? Or was he a war criminal who destroyed evidence of murder and set a precedent that would corrupt the American military? Was he protecting his men from an unjust prosecution? Or was he enabling them to become murderers? And here's the deeper question. If you were in Patton's position, what would you have done? Would you have prosecuted your own soldiers, knowing it would destroy the fighting spirit of your army and potentially cost American lives? Or would you have done what Patton did? Buried the evidence, protected the men, and accepted the moral stain? Because that's the thing about war. It doesn't give you good choices. It gives you choices between different kinds of terrible. And commanders have to make those choices knowing that whatever they decide, people will die. Either the men they protect, or the men they prosecute, or both. Patton chose to protect his own. He chose victory over justice. And that choice defines him, for better or worse, as one of the most morally complex commanders in American military history. So what do you think? Drop your answer in the comments. Was Patton right or wrong? Because 70 years later, history still hasn't decided. And maybe it never will.